Hey, it's Danny from ProjectManaverse.com, and in this video I'm going to explain how to write your project plan. I'm going to give you 8 specific steps to writing your project plan. So let's get started. First of all, what's a project plan? Just go through the basics. So a project, especially an IT project, is a very large endeavor. A lot of work goes into these projects. There's loads of activities, there's loads of resources, there's loads of deliverables that you need to do, and your project plan is basically a list of all those activities in the right order, and it stipulates when those activities need to be done. That's essentially what your project plan is in a very summarized form. So that's what your project plan is, and as a project manager you should really care about making your project plan the best it can possibly be, the highest quality, because the project plan has the power to make or break your project. If you've got a bad project plan, your project is going to fail or suffer. But if you've got a really good, thorough, detailed project plan, it will make your life so much easier as a project manager, and it will massively de-risk your project as well. So you should really care about getting a good spot on project plan. Okay, so that's the background. So let me go through the 8 steps of creating your project plan. Step number 1 is, first of all, you need to create a very high level framework and understand how you're going to visualize your project plan. So if we take a plan on a page example, let's say you've got a plan on a page portrait, what you want to do is have your timeline across the bottom. So you've got your months across the top there. And then on the left here, that's the bit you need to break down your project into. So you need to decide some kind of categories. Now you can do it the old-fashioned waterfall style and break it down by project mobilization at the top, and then you've got your define stage, and then you've got your test phase, sorry, your build phase and your test phase, then your go live phase and your warranty phase. So when you actually plot it out, it will be a nice kind of waterfall cascade going down. That's one way of doing it. That's the standard way. You can do it any way you want, really. You can carve up your project into different categories, but you want to ideally represent it on a plan on a page. You can certainly have a detailed plan beneath your plan on a page in Excel or MSP or whatever format you want. But first of all, you need to decide how you're going to break up your project so it's manageable, so it's easy to look at, and you can communicate it to your stakeholders clearly. So as I say, you can either go with your classic project phase way, or you could break it up into sections of deliverables. So if you're doing a database upgrade and a software upgrade and some infrastructure build, you could break up the build, perhaps. Up to you how you do it. But step 1 is to get the framework of that plan first of all. Step 2 is your work breakdown structure. So a work breakdown structure is essentially taking the highest chunk of work, which is just your project outcome. Let's say the highest level is to upgrade the software. That's what the project is all about. Then you want to break that down into chunks of work. So let's say you broke that upgrade into 3 chunks of work, which are about a few months each. Then you take each of those chunks and you break that down further, and you keep breaking it down till you've got an activity that's maybe like a week or so. And that's what your work breakdown structure is. So it's you can imagine like a car, for example. Let's say you had a car blueprint, you've got your chassis and you've got your wheels. You want to break down that solid car into all its components, and so you can clearly see all the elements that go into that overall deliverable, which is a car. You want to do the same for your project and break it down as much as possible. So once you've done that, you know exactly, you start with your scope, what's your project scope, and you break that down entirely. And now you know this is what we have to do to achieve our project. If we do all these bits on here, then we need to and that's going to get us to our outcome. So that's step 2, is do your work breakdown structure. The next step, step 3, is to assign a duration to each of those tasks in your work breakdown structure. So now you've got what you need to do. Now you need to figure out how long each step or each task is going to take, and you can estimate it. And there's various ways you can estimate. You can do gut feel, you can do 3-point estimating, you can use experience, you can vote. There's various ways you can do it. But you can do that with your team or by yourself. I recommend doing it with a team. Do it together to get different perspectives, different views. But for each task, just estimate how long it's going to take, and you should know ahead of doing that how many people are going to be doing that task. Usually if you've broken it down enough and it's, say, a week-long activity, you're going to have one person doing it, one engineer or one DBA or whoever it might be. But you just make sure you understand that first of all. So when you're doing a duration for each task, put in the duration, number of days is probably best, and then also how many people are working on that. Is it one person? Is it two people? And assume that they're full-time as well. So just to make it a bit clearer, just be consistent with your way of categorizing these durations. So make sure that you're doing, if it's days, then do days. If it's hours, do hours. I recommend doing days. But again, put the number of resources, and then just at the start of your planning, decide, are we going to assume that everyone is spending 5 hours a day on the project? Are we assuming everyone's spending 7 hours a day on the project? Just get that sorted so you can be very clear when you're planning your durations for each task. Okay, so that was step 3, assign the duration. Step 4 is we're really getting into it now. Step 4 is actually assigning that to the plan. So you've got your plan framework, you've got all your tasks. Now you want to plot those tasks on your plan. So you want to start putting them in order. And I recommend you do that with your team again. It's best to do this in a workshop if you can, face to face, on a big whiteboard, big screen, or whatever you've got there to use. I like doing it the old-fashioned way, using paper and pen or post-it notes, because you can move things around easily. But yeah, get everyone together and go through it. You've got all your tasks. Now you want to plot them on the actual plan on the page. And now, once you've done that, you can actually kind of see how it all looks, and you can see the duration of the project. So that was step 4. Add the correct order and plot them on there. So step 5 is identify the critical path. This is a really important bit. So once you've got all your activities plotted out on your plan on a page, you need to identify the critical path. And that basically means, what are all the activities that must be done in sequence that if they are delayed, it will have an impact on your end delivery date. So they've got to be done in sequence, and each step in that sequence is dependent on the previous step. So let's give you a very basic example. Let's say you have to do your requirements first of all and get your requirements signed off. Once you've done that, then you can start your actual design phase. And then you've got to get your design signed off. And once you've done that design, then you can start the build. And once you've done your build, you've got to get your build signed off. And once you've done your build, you can do your testing. So that's a critical path. It means you can't start each milestone until you've done the previous one. And you want to highlight those milestones that are the critical ones on your plan, and do a rough line in terms of what are the critical things that must be done. Now, I will say that in reality, there's always a little bit of flexibility on your critical path, because you could technically, to give you an example, you could start building the product with only 95% of your design done. Similarly, you could start testing your product with only 90% of the build done. All depends on the project and the situation. So when it actually comes to the crunch, there is some flexibility with a critical path. But to start with, when you're identifying it, think idealistically. What's the ideal critical path? What do we want to make sure happens in order? So you can, hopefully you understand that, right? So if you've got your plan mapped out and you've got your critical path, now you know if your requirements are late, and let's say your requirements are a month late to get signed off, and that pushes to the right, well, that now means you can't start your design till a month later, and that now means you can't start your build till a month later, and it's pushing all those milestones to the right. Ultimately, your go live date is going to push to the right as well. So you need to figure out all those key dependencies or key order of events that need to feed into that final go live date, and that is your critical path basically. So you know if any of those milestones slips, that's going to push out your ultimate go live date. So make sure you do that. So that was step 5, identify the critical path. Now, step 6 is to actually plan your go live date. So now that you've done this, you've got your plan, and what I've just described as a side note is called left to right planning, as in you start from the start of the project and you estimate how long everything is going to take, and you plot it out and you build up your plan from left to right, from the start of the project to the go live date. Now you've done that, you can see roughly when your go live needs to be. Now, in reality, in the real world, you can't just use that date that whatever it has. Let's say it's landed on, for example, Wednesday, the 15th of November. You can't just say, right, we're going to go on that we're going to go live that date no matter what. Usually there's some kind of governance around going live. So there's only certain times you can go live, either because there's a release cycle that you have to adhere to in your company, where your there'll be a central function that does releases and does deployments into production. You have to follow their schedule, or it could be that it's just not a good time in the organization to go live because there's other stuff going on, or there could be the business areas that you need to be able to contribute to your project are very busy at that time. So you need to figure out, you might have to do this offline, come back to it when your go live date is going to be. But that go live date is really important because you have to get that thoroughly socialized and signed off. But that was the next step. Get that go live date agreed and finalized. Now, once you've done that, you might find that your go live date has to come back a little bit. So let's say it was the 15th of November in your ideal plan, but for whatever reason, you really have to get this done by the 10th of October. Now, because of that, that leads onto our step 7, which is optimize and refine the plan. Now you've got all the steps and you've got the duration, you know the critical path, you know your final go live date. Now you have to try and optimize your plan to bring in the timelines and make it as efficient as possible. So you can do things like trying to do some stuff in parallel. You can think about bringing in more resources to speed things up. There's various things you can do, but you've got to tidy it up now and try and fit that ultimate go live date to get everything done in there. And ideally, you'll have a little bit of contingency baked into your plan, but sometimes you have to take that out just to try and hit that go live date. Now, as I said, that's left to right planning. Sometimes you have to do right to left planning, where you've got a hard deadline you have to meet before you even start planning. You know you've got to, let's say there's a new change in the law and that has impacted your product or your organization. So you have to change something in the coding to make sure you're adhering to this law, or we have to produce some new reporting and that law is coming in on this date. So you know no matter what, you've got to hit it by this date or you're going to be in breach of the law. In those cases, you have to work from right to left. So you've got your go live date and you kind of go backwards. It's a kind of the same principles. You still have to figure out all the tasks and get the durations, but then you have to work harder to try and shoehorn it into that ultimate go live date. Just a little side note there. Okay, so step 8 is a final one, really important one. So once you've got your plan, you've worked with your team, you've got it on paper, now you have to socialize that plan with all the stakeholders on your project, especially all the people that are going to be doing something on that plan. They absolutely must see that plan and agree to those timelines that you put in there, get it in writing. And also all these stakeholders that are going to be impacted by your project. So at the start of your project, you'll ideally do a stakeholder map to identify all those stakeholders. So I won't go into that now, but make sure you socialize that plan, make sure everyone has a chance to impact assess it and have a look at it and make sure they're happy with it. And then you can sign it off and that is your baseline plan and you can go ahead with your project. Okay, I'll quickly recap on those steps and then we'll call it a day. Step 1, do your high level plan. How are you going to frame it? You got your time, of course, but then how are you going to break down those key areas? Are you going to do mobilize, define, build, test, and execute, or are you going to do it in a different way? Step 2 is your work breakdown structure. Break down all your work into tasks as low level as you can, so you know exactly what you need to do and you can explode it out and get that view of all those tasks that need to be done on your project. Step 3 is assign duration to all those tasks. Don't forget to specify how many resources are going to be working on that specific task and then assign a duration for it. Is it 1 day, 5 days, etc. Step 4 is add those tasks to your plan. So you plot them onto your plan. Step 5 is identify that critical path. What is a sequence of milestones or activities that must be done in that certain order, that if any of those are delayed, it will have a knock-on impact effect down the chain that will ultimately impact your go live date and push it to the right. Step 6, plan your go live date. Understand when roughly it needs to be, then get all the governance in place and do all the socializing to get that go live date nailed down, because it's very important. You can't just pick any date you want. Step 7 is optimize and refine your plan. So if your go live date came forward or came back, you need to try and change things around, put more resources on, do things in parallel to try and make your plan slicker to make it work to hit that date. And then last one is socialize the plan and get it signed off and approved. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I'm over time. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. And if you want to see more videos like this one, I'm doing daily videos, hit the subscribe button. And until tomorrow, please take care.